One day, my husband came home and said that his friend had recently acquired a house with air conditioning available and asked if we would like to rent it since the house we lived in only had a swamp cooler. The previous summer was horrible and we suffered through some extreme heat. I was not going to pass on this opportunity, and so we signed all of the paperwork and moved in right away. One early morning while getting home from dropping my husband off at work, I was suddenly overcome with such a strong feeling of nausea. I thought nothing of it and parked the car. As I stepped into the house, my eyes fixated on the kitchen area. There he was, a man who was see-through. He was bent over, peeking at me from the wall between the kitchen and the living room, hiding himself from the waist down. He was just staring at me. As soon as I saw him, I dropped my keys to the tile floor. He quickly stood upright and was now hiding his whole self behind the wall. Now, normally, I would have screamed, but at this age, I was over it. Having seen so many spirits since my early childhood, I had grown accustomed to the unexpected visits. I turned on the lights in every room, making sure no one was physically there, and went to bed. Later that night, on our ride home from work, I told my husband of this unexpected visitor. He laughed at me nervously and told me to quit making up stories. I brushed him off because I knew that he had never experienced anything like this before. My brother passed away shortly after this, and we decided to move in with my dad so that he would not be alone during our grieving process. My husband did not work on Mondays, and he decided to finish cleaning out that house and turn in the keys to the landlord, since that was his friend. When I got to my dad's house that night, my husband said that he needed to talk to me. I asked him if he had turned in the keys, and he yelled, "Hell yes!" He said to listen to him and that what he had to say was serious. I sat up straight and gave him my full attention, not saying a word. He said he had gone into the rental house and started to sweep the floors. Since there was no furniture inside, he said that every noise echoed. As he started to sweep, he said he heard a man's voice clearly say, "Do you need some help here?" He said it startled him and began looking around and saw that no one was there. He said that every hair on the back of his neck stood up and swore that it sounded like someone was standing right behind him, talking directly into his ear. He said he ran out of that house so fast he forgot to lock the doors. He finally decided to tell me that the landlord had bought the house because the little old man that lived there previously had died inside this home, and that he had been dead for some days before anyone found him. After having experienced this firsthand, it's safe to say my husband is now a believer. Last night, around 10 p.m., my boyfriend and I were sitting in the living room trying to find a movie to watch on Amazon Prime Video. We have video surveillance cameras everywhere outside. 2 that point to the front door at different angles, 1 for the backyard and 1 for the side of the house. The monitor screen is kept in the living room on a table next to the recliner that I was sitting in. I just sat down for not even 5 minutes, then I heard a child's voice come over the monitor. The voice said, "Hello." I thought to myself for a minute, "Fuck, does my son have his bedroom window open and is yelling through the window for some reason, and the camera is picking it up because there is a camera next to his bedroom window?" Then I remembered, no, it can't be, because he was sleeping in my bed. I called up to him and he answered. I look at the monitor screen and I see a man who appeared to be very tall. He was wearing a red and white flannel shirt. He was holding a little girl's hand. She looked like she had striped long sleeves with frizzy blonde hair. They were walking up the steps to get into our entryway, and I turned to my boyfriend and said, "Somebody's here." We live in the middle of absolutely nowhere. We live by a swamp. My closest neighbors are bears and coyotes and a couple Amish houses about a mile or so down the road. So there are never any people, at least that we know of, who go Walking down our street pitch black with no streetlights on a back road at 10 p.m. at night, so it seemed very strange to us. Just as the man and the girl get to our front door, my boyfriend opens the door and they were gone. Not a single trace or sign of them. My boyfriend goes outside by the road to see if he could see any cars, but there was nothing. We thought maybe they were having car trouble and stopped for help, but there were no signs of that being a possibility. I let the dog outside, and my boyfriend went outside with a flashlight, but nothing was there. We watched the camera footage, and the people coming to the door never recorded. We reviewed old camera footage and saw nothing that looked or sounded like that. We don't even know people that look like that or ever have anybody that could have possibly come over that looked like that. My boyfriend does not believe in ghosts, but seeing that we had no explanation for it, I think he changed his mind. We've lived in this house for 4 years, and I personally have never experienced anything until last night. My boyfriend admitted that the one night I was at work, he saw something moving in the yard and thought it was an animal, but went out to look and nothing was there, but my son's tire swing was swinging back and forth like crazy. My son has been complaining for the past few months that he doesn't like to sleep in his bed because it sounds like something is crawling around under his bed and his bed shakes. The original part of the house was built in the 1800s and was used as an old schoolhouse. An addition was put onto the house 20 years ago to make it bigger. The old schoolmaster used to live across the street in a house that is no longer there. I talked to my boyfriend today, and we both said that what happened is really weird, and we've come to terms with it probably being a ghost sighting. I know I'm not crazy because he saw them and heard the voice too. I've seen many ghosts in my lifetime. I just wondered what took so long for me to see one here. What bothers me is that it seemed like they wanted to get my attention, and it makes me feel very uneasy. A few days leading up to this, I would sit in the living room and just feel overwhelming dread and terrible anxiety. After seeing them, I don't feel any of that anymore. So weird. This happened when my child was 5 years old. They're about to be 13 now. I was laying in bed one morning, playing on my phone, waiting for them to wake up. About an hour into mindless scrolling, and yes, I was wide awake, I heard them begin humming a cute little tune, skip to the refrigerator, open it, and pull out the lunch meat to snack on. They were stoked because I got the good stuff from the deli, so it was in the plastic bags and made a distinct sound when you opened it. They then shut the fridge, happily skipped back to the living room while humming, turned on the TV, and began playing an episode of some cartoon show. I heard the dialogue in the beginning of the episode for about 30 to 45 seconds before the sound just kind of faded out. It was silent again, and I was like, oh, they probably turned the TV down a little because it was so loud. I better get out of bed and stop being lazy. I can't leave them alone. So I get up and go into the living room and turn the corner to say, "Hi, Zoe." Except the TV was off and they were nowhere to be found. I walked into their bedroom. They were dead, asleep. I walked in, sat on their bed, and asked, "Did you just go back to sleep?" They were very confused and a little annoyed that I woke them up. They had no clue what I was talking about, so I just let it go. I told them, "Well, you can get up and watch cartoons now if you want to." They got really excited and were like, "Okay, Mommy." I had to pee, so I went into the bathroom and shut the door. That's when it happened. I heard them happily humming, skipping to the fridge. They opened it, grabbed the salami, shut the door, skipped back happily humming that exact same tune, turned on the TV to that exact episode, and sat there munching on salami for breakfast. Has anyone else had this happen? I've never had it happen since. Okay, hear me out. I hopped on a train and took a trip to the capital today, ate good food, went to a few shops, and enjoyed the weather. After a while, I had to go pee, so I went into a McDonald's bathroom. In my country, these are all pay toilets with pretty much no exception, so I was already baffled when there were no barrier doors, simply about 4 black pedestals scattered across a pretty big entrance, which you could walk right through. No pay machine, no doors. I'd bought a heavy crystal druzy, about 18 pounds, earlier, so I would have remembered putting it down and looking for change in my bag, as I wasn't able to hold it with one hand. I did not pay, I know that. There was a lady standing next to one of the pedestals. Usually someone watches to make sure everyone pays correctly and doesn't climb over the doors. I was decently confused as to where the barriers were and why the lady was standing there if the toilet was free anyway, but the pressure on my bladder made me disappear into a stall before I could have asked any questions. The bathroom was spacey and luxurious, which was unusual in itself for a McDonald's bathroom, but after I'd washed my hands, the real surprise hit me. Walking towards the exit, I recognized the usual doors connected to the pedestals and a pay machine sitting on top of each one of them. I was in a rush as I had to catch my train, so I wasn't able to investigate, but I stood there for a few seconds in utter disbelief and even turned my head a few times walking up the stairs. This was the only entrance and the only exit. Before I'd gone into that toilet stall, there were no doors, no machines. I know some of these pay toilet doors can fold sideways to let customers in for free, but the coin machines randomly appearing in a matter of a few minutes, that's unexplainable. This has been on my mind all day now. I shared this with a few friends, but they all basically shrug it off and laugh with no further implication. Did I shift into a parallel universe while in a public restroom, or was it a glitch in the Matrix? What did I experience? I used to live in Philadelphia and worked at Spring Garden and Delaware Avenue right on the Delaware River. One day, midsummer, as I'm leaving work just after 5 p.m., I had just stepped out of the building and taken maybe 15 steps towards the parking lot when I looked up and noticed this giant blob of undulating pixels coming off the river about 4 to 5 stories up. I stood there kind of dumbstruck for a few seconds, watching it as it moved towards Center City, then glanced around me to see if anyone else noticed it. If they did, they didn't acknowledge it. I stood there and watched this thing that stretched 2 to 3 stories high by about 50 feet long move across the building on the other side of the parking lot. It shimmered and undulated like a silverfish would. Has anyone ever seen anything like this? This is such a weird thing, and yet it's completely inexplicable. I have had my dog for 13 years. In those 13 years, I must have bought about as many flexi leashes. They always disappear from my car. I want to keep it in the car, so I know I always have one at hand if I'm spontaneously going somewhere. I always bring my dog everywhere, and sometimes I will forget his leash at home. So I bought a car leash when I first got him. It has its spot in the magazine pouch behind the shotgun seat. It will be there for a few weeks. I might even use it a few times. I might even check whether it's still there off and on, and always after a few months of ownership, the flexi leash will disappear from its spot. No, it's not from me using it and forgetting I used it. I use it extremely rarely, and I always put it back where it belongs. It belongs there for the above-described reason. I have to buy one about once a year. It doesn't matter if it's a cheap one, an expensive one, which brand, what color. It doesn't matter that I've gone through several cars since I first adopted my dog from the shelter. It always goes missing. The last time this happened was just a few days ago. I know for absolutely certain that it was in its accustomed spot the day before because I specifically checked. I knew I was going to have to dog sit another dog, and I like to use the flexi leash with him. My dog runs off the leash 99% of the time, hence the rare usage of the flexi leash. So the evening before, I checked specifically that the leash was there, and it was, with half its string sticking out of the seat pouch. Next day, I pick up the dog from my neighbor and I go to take the two canines for a walk at the park. I go to the pouch to get the flexi leash, and by gods, it's flipping gone again. At this point, it's just irritating. Why am I not allowed to have it? Where do they go? It's like it's jinxed. The other week, my dog sitter lost my extra one. And by lost, I mean I gave it to her in a bag with other doggy things, and when I went to pick my dog up, she said she dropped it from out of the bag and it went on the floor, but she can't find it anywhere. Now, the flexi leash curse has been extended to my dog sitter. So I'm taking a coffee break from work, brought a cup and some cookies to the balcony, and I'm quietly enjoying them with my dog by my side. All of a sudden, I see what seemed like water drop down on top of my dog, like a big cup's volume. I also heard it hitting the floor and saw it very clearly, even though it was for a split second. My dog jumped because it startled him and immediately started sniffing the spot where it landed. I immediately looked up, and there was nothing. Then I looked at the floor, and it was 100% dry, like absolutely not a single drop of water anywhere to be seen. I pat my dog down, and he is also completely dry. I look around, and he does the same, we both with a huge look of confusion on our faces. I'm a very skeptical man, but I have zero explanation for what just happened. The place the water dropped from is dry on the ceiling. The floor is dry. My dog is dry, but both him and I clearly saw and heard it. My dog reacted before me, so it wasn't me who startled him. From the few frames I got as it dropped, it looked like water, but it seemed to be more viscous. Also worth mentioning, I'm not high or anything, just drinking a cup of coffee. I'm still sitting here trying to understand what the fuck just happened. Okay, so this happened about 8 years ago when I was 26. I used to cycle to and from where I was working. Before setting off home, I bundled up my jumper and clipped it onto the back of my bike, as I often did, and set off and reached a small junction that I was very familiar with. To the left was a flat path and led towards a pedestrianized area and a shop. To the right was steep and hilly and part of a busy bus route. I often chose to go right because I used to love racing down the hill and felt very in control and safe on my bike. What's more, I saw a colleague in that direction and wanted to say hi or bye as I went past, so I turned to go right. The next thing I knew, everything went very bright, and I was dazzled and felt a jolt as I was thrown off my bike. As I sat up, barely injured, I realized that I was on the left of the junction on the pedestrian path. Someone asked if I was okay, and I said I was fine and thanked them. After inspection, I realized that the sleeve of my jumper had fallen loose from its clip and had got caught in the bike chain, which had thrown me off my bike. Yet I was sure I had turned right. And if I had turned right, then my sleeve falling loose and falling off my bike would have been catastrophic, as I would have been hurtling down a hill with buses and cars. Another interesting thing is that since that event, my life has changed significantly, mostly for the better. Things were not great for me at that time for various reasons, yet since then it feels like I shifted and got another chance at life. I get chills thinking about it and sometimes can't stop myself from thinking about it. I want to share this because doing so might help me make some sense of this extremely fortunate but bizarre experience. This happened near the end of 2020. At the time, I was dating this one girl, and we decided that day to go for a walk around the city. It was near September or October, so it was pretty sunny, and there was a fair amount of people. Not crowded, but certainly not empty. The heat really made me crave a drink, so I decided to get an iced tea, and we decided to keep walking around. Some minutes later, as I was three-fourths done with the drink, me and my ex heard a sudden clink near us. We didn't know what that sound was for around 2 minutes as we kept walking until I started drinking from the iced tea, and there it was, a coin. The chances of a coin falling from the sky landing exactly in my drink, and on top of that, for it to have been the highest value coin in my country, was wild. Talked about that for a solid week after this. What gives this phenomenon? I've seen it discussed sometimes over, but have never gotten a solid picture of what it might mean. Last night, I was in the middle of a shift for a well-known food courier service. I park in between orders at a 24-hour Walgreens, as it is prime location for many restaurants. Keep in mind that it is early evening, but still fairly bright, and there is a car show in the parking lot of the adjacent Lowe's. I get an order from a restaurant no more than half a mile away, but the house is in the next town, so I'm gone for roughly 30 to 40 minutes minimum round trip. Once I complete the delivery, I had to call my driver support for an issue with the food packaging. When I get off with them, I'm about 5 minutes away from Walgreens and put myself in pause so that I don't receive orders from the other town. When I arrive, my pause mode, which is supposed to last 30 minutes, is shut off, and I have been kicked off my shift for inactivity. Luckily, there's a spare shift available, likely my own, and so I sign back in. It's also still barely light out, and I'm not the most observant person in the world, so during the lull before late-night meals start, I sit in my car playing word games and such. Before I realize that, I'm sitting in total darkness. Obviously, it's now night, but the Walgreens parking lot and the inside of the store is completely dark. The car show was over, and the Lowe's lot, which is supposed to be open another hour, was also dark. When I say dark, I was sitting in darkness, like in the middle of the woods without a flashlight dark. Nonetheless, at the time, I didn't think too much of it. Though it hasn't happened recently, last summer the Walgreens did close early occasionally due to staff shortages, but the lot lights were still kept on and the inside was lit with dim lighting. In the middle of this realization, I actually get an order request for the Walgreens. I thought about taking it, as we can get half off the order if the store is closed, but I figured the effort to accomplish this was too much for the payout. I then notice there is one other car in the lot directly in the middle. The car is running and they only have their daylights on. Before I could think too much more about it, I get an order to a very close restaurant with the destination in the neighborhood directly behind it. So I circle the building and confirm that it is empty and there are 0 lights anywhere near these 2 businesses. As the delivery was so close, I was gone roughly 10, maybe 15 minutes. I'm sure that it can be guessed that upon returning, Walgreens was open, lit up like Christmas, and nearly every spot taken with customers likely going for last-minute Mother's Day cards. Lowe's, too, was lit up and close to their actual closing time. I then make the tragic error of looking through my order history and notice that there was no Walgreens order. This prompted me from merely freaking out to sheer terror. I'm not kidding when I say I experienced foreboding dread like I have never felt. I'm a 36-year-old man and have had a few other creepy or unexplained events happen to me in my life, but nothing of this caliber. I have no shame in admitting that I was scared to the point of near tears. Okay, maybe I'm slightly ashamed. Upon reflection, this experience has reminded me of the concept of back rooms, but like an outdoor version. I'm relatively new to this theory, so I may be misinterpreting it, but I am curious as to whether anyone else has had similar experiences. About 10 years ago, give or take, I took my sister to get her belly button pierced for Christmas. We got finished around 10 to 10:30 p.m. and began walking a few blocks back to my car. When we got to the first intersection, a couple was walking towards us coming from the side street on our right. The woman was wearing a really cute plaid coat, and her hair was brownish, auburnish, and she was gorgeous. The man was wearing a black pea coat, and they were just chatting while walking. We all looked up, smiled at one another, and went back to talking amongst ourselves. Right as we got close to each other, my sister, her boyfriend, and I moved closer to the curb that was on our left to make room for them because they were turning on the street towards us. As soon as all three of us moved closer to the road and looked up to smile again and say sorry, we say sorry for everything and we were in their way, they were just gone. All three of us just stopped and started frantically looking around, and my sister's boyfriend was like, "You guys just saw them, right?" There was literally nowhere they could have gone. These were not spirits. This couple were as real as you and I. We looked up, smiled at each other multiple times, and they just disappeared into thin air. We were looking at them and blinked, and they were gone. Nothing felt paranormal. I actually wondered if they were in another version of our reality, losing their shit also because we disappeared at the exact same time. Hello, little Vickies. Thanks for listening. If you like what you heard and you haven't subscribed already, please do. And hit the like button, as they're both very helpful to my growth here on YouTube. If you have a suggestion or simply want to say hello, please leave a comment. I love to hear what you guys have to say. If you have a story of your own you'd like to share and possibly have read on the channel, send it to me at veronica45stories@gmail.com. Link is also in the description, as are other ways to support the channel if you feel so inclined. I post every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday by 5 p.m. Pacific. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it beyond measure. And until next time, be good.